Late Wednesday night in Toledo, Ohio, just past 11, the streets were quiet, nearly empty. Most people were home, save for a few night shift workers heading in or out. One of the few vehicles moving through town belonged to Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. She was returning from a long meeting at a military base a couple of hours south. Her black government-issued SUV humming along quietly. It wasn't flashy, but it got the job done just like her. Adrienne's driving was steady, uneventful. She kept to her lane, obeyed the speed limit, and let her mind wander slightly after a long day. But while she wasn't drawing attention, her vehicle caught the eye of someone else, Sergeant Daniel Mercer. He was sitting idle in his patrol cruiser near Reynolds Road, half watching the road while scrolling his phone and sipping from a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. When her SUV passed, something about it piqued his interest. No clear reason, just a feeling. Without hesitation, he tossed the coffee, flipped on his cruiser's lights, and pulled it behind her. Adrienne saw the flashing lights in her mirror and calmly eased the SUV to the side of the road. Every move she made was deliberate and composed. Years of training kept her nerves in check, she observed as the officer approached from the driver's side, hand resting near his weapon. Flashlight pointed at her window. He didn't bother going to the far side, just walked straight up. License and registration, he said flatly. No introduction, no explanation, keeping her hands visible. Adrienne lowered the window halfway. Could you please tell me why I'm being pulled over? You were drifting across lanes, he said, light shining into her face. Didn't signal. Looked like you might have been drinking. Her face didn't flinch. I haven't had anything to drink. He didn't budge. License and registration, he repeated, more curt this time. Adrienne didn't protest. She reached calmly into the glove box, retrieved the documents, and handed them over. This vehicle belongs to the government. I'm a federal employee. He glanced at her credentials, pausing slightly. Military? Yes. He gave a faint smirk. Doesn't mean the rules don't apply. I never claimed they didn't. His tone grew harder. Step out of the vehicle. She blinked. Excuse me, you heard me. I'm doing a field sobriety check. Her voice stayed calm. On what suspicion? I've cooperated. I haven't been drinking. I'd like to know your justification. He stepped closer, tension rising between them. Are you refusing to follow orders? I'm asking for clarity, she said evenly. He didn't respond with words. Instead, he opened her door abruptly. Out. Now, Adrienne reached for her phone and hit record. This is being documented, she said, her tone cool but firm. He saw the phone and hesitated slightly but didn't stop. Now, he repeated. She stepped out of the vehicle, not with anger, but with a quiet authority. Even in plain clothes, the way she moved said she'd been in charge of far more serious situations than this. Mercer, NOTICED, for a split second. Doubt flickered across his face, but it passed, buried under pride. He ran her through a field sobriety test under the harsh streetlight. Every step she took was deliberate, controlled exactly as it should be. She was stone-cold sober. Still, he wrote her a citation, failure to maintain lane. He muttered, handed it over. Adrienne took it without argument. She looked at him, not confrontational, just clear-eyed, and got back into her SUV. Then she drove away. For Mercer, it was just another traffic stop. At the precinct, he filed the report quickly, light details, no complications. He dropped his body cam on the charger and moved on. In the break room, it became a story to laugh about. He joked with Officer Diaz about a woman who tried to flash a federal badge to scare him. She didn't rattle me, he said confidently. Diaz looked up. Did she give a name? Yeah, Adrienne Wallace. The mood shifted. Diaz raised an eyebrow. You're talking about Lieutenant Colonel Wallace? She's the logistics chief at Fort Wayne. Gave a speech at the academy last year. Bronze Star to deployments. Mercer's confidence faltered just a bit, but he shrugged it off. Doesn't matter. I was in charge on the street. Still, Diaz's tone lingered in his mind. Adrienne didn't dwell on it emotionally. She wasn't rattled or angry. Her career had prepared her for worse. But this moment wasn't just about her. It reminded her of every time she'd watched younger service members get talked down to. Every woman told to be quiet. Every moment someone assumed their authority, let them disregard respect. So she responded, not with drama, not with shouting, with purpose. Asterisk. The silence Adrienne had maintained the night before wasn't born from fear. It was calculated. The following morning, she sat at her desk at Fort Wayne, Her gaze locked on the computer screen, weariness etched across her features. Yes, she was tired, but not just from lack of sleep. Her mind had been on repeat all night, dissecting every detail of the traffic stop, his voice, the way his hand hovered casually near his sidearm, the deliberate goading in his tone. He had tried to provoke her, bait her into reacting. She hadn't, but that restraint lingered like smoke in her lungs because she understood how quickly it all could have spiraled. A knock broke her focus. Sergeant Daniels entered the office. "You all right, ma'am?" Without looking away from the screen, she replied, "I'm handling it." He stepped inside, shut the door quietly. His face was grave. "I watched the video. Do you want me to?" "Lupin Base Legal already did," she said simply. Daniels hesitated, uncertain. "You really going to move forward with this?" Adrian finally met his eyes, calm and unwavering. "I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing it because it's the right thing," and she meant every word. Her entire career had been shaped by discipline, accountability, and setting a standard. Every insignia on her uniform told a story earned through stress, sweat, and, at times, danger. She had commanded under fire, directed emergency missions, managed delicate international deployments, yet none of that mattered during that roadside encounter. To Officer Mercer, she was just another driver who didn't defer fast enough. That was what she couldn't forget. So she acted. She reached out to legal support, filed a report with the Inspector General, and attached the unfiltered footage. No fanfare, just facts. Within days, the wheels began to turn. Mercer's name was now officially part of an investigation. The department's legal team had been looped in. Adrienne didn't disrupt her routine. She didn't post online or give interviews. But behind the scenes, she was assembling her case. Her attorney had warned her this incident may have crossed legal lines, possibly even violated federal protections. If so, they pursue it all the way. Adrienne didn't hesitate. She was ready. Mercer, on the other hand, thought it would all pass quietly. That illusion shattered when he received a plain manila envelope, his name typed across the front. He ripped it open in the precinct parking lot, expecting a routine memo. It wasn't. It was a formal legal notice. He was being sued. The charge, violation of civil rights. The complainant, Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace. Allegations included wrongful stop, abuse of authority, and coercive conduct. Mercer stared at the document, scoffing. "Yeah, okay, this won't hold up." But walking back inside, he noticed the shift. Colleagues' glances lingered, conversations quieted when he passed. And then came the summons. His supervisor, Officer Reading, wanted a word. Behind closed doors, blinds drawn. "We need to talk," Reading said without preamble. Mercer crossed his arms. "About that woman, she's overreacting." Playing the victim, Reading didn't look amused. "She's not acting. Do you have any idea who she is?" "I don't care. She had an attitude." She pushed back. "Now she's mad I didn't treat her like royalty." Reading's expression hardened. "She's a senior officer with an impeccable record. People in Washington know her, and the video, it's damning. Yours and hers." Mercer rolled his eyes. "So we're supposed to bow because she's got a fancy title?" "No, but we're not going to pretend it didn't happen either," Reading said. "This is serious, Mercer. Real serious. There's a lawsuit coming down, and when the press catches wind in, trust me, they will. It's going to be everywhere." Mercer was quiet. "I didn't arrest her. I didn't lay a hand on her. I followed protocol. You escalated it. You jumped to assumptions. You treated her like a threat before you even verified her identity." For once, Mercer had no comeback. With each day leading up to the trial, the atmosphere around him thickened. Whispers followed him. People avoided meeting his eyes. No one said it aloud, but the message was clear. His reputation was slipping. Adrienne, meanwhile, stayed focused. No public statements, no social media declarations, just meetings with her attorney, quiet reviews of footage, and thorough documentation of everything she remembered. Steady, intentional, unshaken. Her attorney, Delaney Price, studied her across the table. "You understand this won't disappear once it's filed. It'll follow you." Adrienne's voice was calm. "That's the point." Price nodded slowly. "Most people wouldn't take it this far." Adrienne leaned in slightly. "I've let too many moments like this slide. Not anymore. This one stays on record." She didn't care for payouts. What she wanted was permanence, a mark, undeniable and unerasable, stating exactly what happened. She wanted a truth that couldn't be dismissed. The courtroom was filled with a low hum of expectation, a quiet tension that settled over the room. When she walked in, there was no hesitation in her step. She didn't try to blend in. Clad in her full military dress decorations, commendations, and insignia on full display, she moved with deliberate grace. This wasn't about pride. It was about principle. She represented more than herself today. She stood for every voice that had been dismissed, every individual who'd faced intimidation. Under the weight of authority misused, across the room, Mercer was already seated. When he noticed her uniform, his composure cracked for the first time. His jaw twitched. But the moment of reckoning wasn't here yet. Every seat in the gallery was taken. It wasn't packed with journalists or flashing cameras, at least not yet. Instead, military personnel from Fort Wayne sat shoulder to shoulder with local law enforcement. Dress blues, badges, and civilian clothes created a quiet tapestry of unity and curiosity. Some were still under the impression this was just another traffic case, but Adrienne knew the truth ran deeper than they imagined. This wasn't about a single night. It was about years of unchecked behavior finally meeting its match. Mercer remained still, barely blinking. His attorney, Charles Breener, leaned close and murmured something. But Mercer didn't flinch. His focus remained locked on the judge's bench, expression rigid. Then the clerk called her name. Adrienne stood, smoothing the front of her uniform with the same calm precision. She used leading troops in unpredictable terrain. She walked toward the witness stand, her movements quiet but confident. Every head turned as she passed. The judge acknowledged her with a respectful nod. "Colonel Wallace, we appreciate your service. You may begin." Prosecutor Delaney Price stepped forward, voice calm and professional. "Lieutenant Colonel, can you describe what occurred the night of January 17th? Adrienne's tone was steady, free from emotion. "I was driving back after a meeting with the Indiana Guard Reserve. It was just past 11 at night. Officer Mercer pulled me over. I wasn't violating any traffic laws. I responded respectfully, but his behavior grew increasingly confrontational. She didn't raise her voice. No anger laced her words, only truth. He told me to exit the vehicle, offering no reason. When I asked why, he escalated. He shouted. That's when I began recording." Delaney nodded slightly. "At any point, did you defy his instructions?" "No." "Did you physically resist in any way?" "No." "Did you make your identity clear?" "I did. I informed him I was a federal employee in an official vehicle." A hush fell over the room. Then they played the footage. First, the recording from her phone, steady and clear. Then the footage from Mercer's body camera. His voice, sharp and hostile, the aggressive stance, his hand near his sidearm, and then her calm, respectful, unshaken. The contrast was jarring. You could feel the shift in the room. The jury didn't speak, but their changed demeanor said enough. Then came the defense's turn. Breener approached slowly, his tone polished and cool. "Colonel Wallace, would it be fair to say Officer Mercer was concerned for safety that night?" She looked him square in the eye. "No. Isn't it possible he saw something he perceived as threatening?" I remained calm. "I obeyed the law. There was no threat." "Then what prompted you to start filming?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because silence can't always protect you. Sometimes the only shield you have is evidence." "No." One said a word, but the truth in her response echoed louder than any shout. Breener gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "So, in your view, officers shouldn't trust their own instincts during a traffic stop?" Adrienne looked him straight in the eye. "I think instincts have to be balanced by self-control. Wearing a badge doesn't mean you can act on impulse. It means you're held to a higher standard." Even the judge lifted her brows at that. Then it was Mercer's turn. He didn't get up to testify. He remained seated, silently watching the footage play on the courtroom screen. Every raised voice, every cutting look, every dismissive motion played out again. The entire room was silent, absorbed in the replay. The prosecutor rose to speak. "Sergeant Mercer, why did you instruct her to exit the vehicle?" Mercer's shoulders stiffened. "She didn't seem right. Did she fail to follow your instructions?" "She questioned my authority." "That's not against the law, is it?" He paused. "No." "Did she become aggressive or make any threats?" "No." "Then why escalate the situation?" Mercer didn't respond. "Were you aware of her military rank at the time?" "No, I wasn't." "And if you had known she was a lieutenant colonel?" His voice dropped a notch. my approach probably would have been different. A heavy silence filled the room. It wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was a rare, unfiltered truth. That night, Mercer hadn't seen a fellow citizen he'd seen someone who didn't fit the mold, someone who didn't immediately comply. Now, with her credentials out in the open and the courtroom watching, the imbalance was impossible to ignore. Still, the decision hadn't been announced. 3 days later, the courtroom was nearly empty. No flashing cameras, no uniformed spectators. Just Adrienne, her legal counsel, a few quiet observers, and Mercer, seated next to his attorney, his jaw tightly clenched. Judge Cynthia Morales looked out over the quiet room. In the case of Wallace versus Mercer, the jury rules in favor of the plaintiff. Mercer shifted, his face rigid. Adrienne didn't flinch. The court finds that Sergeant Mercer conducted an unlawful traffic stop, violating constitutional protections. His conduct was outside the bounds of department standards and professional expectations. There were no cheers or protests, only a silence. That seemed to weigh down every corner of the courtroom. Mercer's attorney leaned in and muttered, "We can file an appeal," but even his tone lacked conviction. The judge continued, "While criminal charges will not be pursued, the plaintiff is awarded $35,000 in damages. This ruling will be officially submitted to the Department of Justice and the Toledo Police Department for further review and potential policy revisions." Adrienne didn't beam or acknowledge the court. She simply gave a small nod, more to herself than anyone else. Her goal had been achieved. Outside the courthouse, Mercer loitered on the steps, a small cluster of reporters nearby. He covered his face with a folder as cameras clicked, offering no statement before slipping into his vehicle and driving off. Inside, Adrienne lingered in the corridor, glanced at her phone, and released a long, quiet breath. Asterisk. Adrienne read the text on her phone. "You won. Case closed." Her attorney came hurrying over. "You know, you could have pushed for a bigger payout." Adrienne gave a small shake of her head. "It wasn't about the money." Delaney studied her face. "Do you really believe any of this will make a difference?" Adrienne looked ahead, eyes on the glass doors. "I'm not sure, but maybe next time he stops someone, he'll think before acting." A week later, Mercer was officially suspended pending an internal investigation. Gossip spread quickly. Some said he'd be quietly moved to another post. Others murmured that this might be the end of his career. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the protection he'd once taken for granted was gone. Everyone could see it now. Back at Fort Wayne, Adrienne resumed her role without fanfare. She didn't give any statements to the media. She didn't celebrate. She simply returned to her duties, training her soldiers, overseeing operations, managing the daily rhythm of leadership. She never wanted to be seen as a symbol. Her aim was to serve and lead with focus. Yet something was different. Within her unit, people noticed. The unspoken message was clear. Respect isn't always about volume. Pain doesn't need to be loud to be valid. Sometimes, staying steady and calm says more than an outburst ever could. The court ruling was in her favor, but Adrienne knew real accountability wasn't a finish line. True change would only come from what happened next. 2 months later, she stood in front of a new batch of recruits, young men and women with eager eyes and restless energy, just starting their military careers. She wasn't there to give them a briefing on strategy or logistics. Her message ran deeper than that. She scanned the room. "How many of you think putting on this uniform guarantees respect?" Several hands went up, some bold, others hesitant. Adrienne gave a knowing nod. "I understand. It can feel like that at first. But here's the truth: respect isn't automatic. It comes from the choices you make, day in and day out." She let that settle in the silence, then continued, "And the same goes for authority. A badge, a rank, a title, those don't make you immune from accountability. They're not privileges. They're responsibilities. And if you can't honor them with integrity, then you're not fit to wear them." From the back, a young soldier leaned forward slightly, drawn in. Adrienne caught his eye and held it. "I was once pulled over by an officer who forgot what his duty actually was. I had options. I could have yelled, I could have stayed quiet, or I could have let it slide." She took a breath. "But I chose to speak up. I gathered the facts. I filed the report. I stood in court. I told the truth." The room still not out of tension, but out of respect. They understood what she was saying. He believed his badge gave him power beyond reach. But real strength didn't come from the symbols on my shoulders. It came from choosing to stand firm. Adrienne shut her folder gently and looked up. Carry yourselves with honesty, lead with intention, and remember when you wear this uniform, you inherit the weight of all those who wore it before you, and the responsibility to set the standard for those who come after. She walked off without waiting for applause. None was necessary. Her message had done its job. If there's one lesson to remember, it's this: power without responsibility becomes a tool of fear. When you see wrongdoing, don't look away, because silence shields the abuser, but courage shields everyone else.